You made me hug you for 60 seconds. Why? Because I needed 1 week where you finally saw me. So the bet, the hoodies, every challenge, you planned all of it? I planned the week. I never planned what you would feel. I've loved you since 16. If you want me gone, I'll leave.
But before I could answer him beneath that oak tree, I had to understand how one harmless bet had brought us there. Anything within reason, Ethan said, holding out his hand while the university arena shook with 15,000 voices. At 22, I should have known better than to accept an open-ended bet from the best friend who had spent most of my life turning ordinary moments into trouble. Instead, I shook his hand. Ethan Brooks and I were finishing our final semester at Westbrook University, but our friendship had started when we were 8. During Little League practice, he borrowed my favorite baseball glove and accidentally took it home. He returned it the next afternoon with 2 burgers, a sheepish grin, and a promise that we would be friends forever. Somehow, that promise survived middle school: terrible haircuts, late-night study sessions, broken-down cars, cheap apartments, and more frozen pizzas than any doctor would recommend. Ethan could make waiting in line for coffee feel like an adventure. I preferred schedules, quiet mornings, organized calendars, and knowing how each day would end. He called me predictable. I called him exhausting. Somehow, we had always worked. On the first Saturday in March, Westbrook hosted its annual charity basketball tournament. Neither of us could play well, but we never missed it. Every year, we sat in the same section, argued over every referee call, and competed to predict the final score. Ethan trusted instinct. I trusted statistics. During the second quarter, he leaned toward me with the grin that usually meant my peaceful afternoon was over. "One game," he said. "Winner gets anything they want." "Anything?" "Anything reasonable," he clarified. "No humiliation, no danger, and either person can veto something that crosses a real line." He offered his hand again. "Unless you are scared." "I am not scared." "Then prove it." We entered our predictions on our phones before halftime and showed them to each other so neither of us could change a number. When the final buzzer sounded nearly 2 hours later, Ethan jumped out of his seat while I stared at the scoreboard. I had missed by 3 points. He had guessed the score exactly. "No way," I muttered. "Pure talent," he announced as students around us laughed. "Pure luck. Luck still counts?" He threw an arm across my shoulders as we joined the crowd moving toward the exits. Outside, cool spring air carried the smell of food trucks and fresh rain. Music drifted from temporary festival stages while students crossed the campus lawn in every direction. Ethan stopped beside the arena steps and looked directly at me. For 1 second, his expression became strangely serious. Then the familiar smile returned. "Remember our deal?" "Unfortunately." "Good. Starting tomorrow for exactly 1 week, you do every reasonable thing I ask." I studied him. "You already have a list, do not you?" His smile widened. "Maybe." "That sounds less like luck and more like a setup." "Trust me, Ryan. That is exactly what worries me." Ethan laughed so hard he nearly dropped the basketball he had won in a raffle. "Relax. You can still say no if something truly bothers you. I just want you to stop planning every second for 1 week." That answer should have reassured me. Instead, the quiet hope beneath his teasing made me wonder what he was not saying. I should have recognized the warning then. Whenever Ethan promised something would be fun, my schedule was about to collapse. I had no idea what his week would expose about either of us. The next morning, I expected Ethan to demand coffee or ask me to carry photography equipment across campus. At exactly 8 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a message that made me stare at the screen for a full minute. Rule number 1. Meet me outside the student union at 9. Wear the blue hoodie I gave you for Christmas. I had almost forgotten about that hoodie. Ethan had bought 2 during a holiday sale, insisting matching sweatshirts looked cool. I thought they made us resemble members of the same overly enthusiastic sports team. I found mine folded in the back of my closet and reluctantly pulled it on. Ethan was waiting beside the fountain in the identical hoodie, holding 2 iced coffees and looking far too pleased with himself. The moment he saw me, his smile widened. "Perfect. You listened." I lost a bet. I did not lose my mind. He handed me one of the coffees, my usual order, prepared exactly the way I liked it. "Good. Then you are ready for rule number 2. We have not finished number 1. You wore the hoodie. Number 1 is complete. We started across campus beneath a bright blue sky while students hurried between weekend events. Several people smiled at our matching clothes, others waved at Ethan, who seemed to know nearly everyone by name. After a few minutes, he stopped outside the bookstore. The mischief in his eyes made me grip my coffee more carefully. "For the rest of today," he said, "if someone assumes we are together, you cannot immediately deny it." I nearly choked. "That is your challenge? Only for today. And you can veto it now if it genuinely makes you uncomfortable." His voice softened. "I mean that." I could have ended the rule. Instead, curiosity got the better of me. "No one is going to ask." Ethan shrugged. "Then this will be easy." Less than 30 seconds later, one of his photography classmates passed us carrying a stack of textbooks. She looked at our hoodies and smiled knowingly. "You two finally made it official?" Ethan said nothing. He simply looked at me, leaving the choice where he had promised it would be. "We are spending the day together," I answered. She laughed as if I had confirmed everything and wished us a happy anniversary before walking away. Ethan bit his lip, failing to hide his amusement. "You planned that?" "I absolutely did not." "You know too many people. That is not a crime." By lunch, the misunderstandings had multiplied. A cashier offered us a couple's discount, which Ethan politely refused. A professor passing through the student center said we looked unusually coordinated. My roommate Caleb texted to ask why social media already contained 3 photos of us standing side by side. Every time I became flustered, Ethan laughed. But there was something gentler beneath the joke. He watched my reaction as though the answer mattered. When I caught him doing it, he always looked away first. Late that afternoon, we stopped beside the campus lake. Sunlight moved across the water and students stretched out on the grass. Ethan handed me the last of his fries without asking whether I wanted them. He had known the answer. "That is enough for today," he said. "See? Nothing terrible happened." I gave him an exhausted smile. "I have 6 more days of this, do I not?" He slipped his hands into his pockets and studied the lake instead of answering immediately. "You do. But if you want me to stop, say it." The offer sounded sincere. That made my decision easier and somehow more confusing. I did not say stop. Ethan turned back to me, and the relief that crossed his face lasted only a heartbeat. "Good," he said, "because tomorrow is where the real challenge begins." As we walked home, I told myself I had continued because a deal was a deal. I did not ask why. I was already curious about what he had planned next. The following afternoon, Ethan sent me an address and a time before I'd finished my first class. "Campus Grocery Market, 3 o'clock. Do not be late." I arrived exactly on time and found him leaning against a shopping cart with the satisfied expression of someone who had spent all morning preparing trouble. "You are smiling too much," I said. "That usually means I should leave." "Too late. Rule number 3. We are shopping together." I looked around the neighborhood market beyond campus. "For what?" "Dinner. You do not cook." "Exactly why I brought you." I took the cart, and for the next 40 minutes, Ethan treated grocery shopping like a treasure hunt. He compared 5 pasta sauces, spent 10 minutes choosing bread, and convinced an elderly employee to explain the history of local honey. Every few aisles, he dropped something ridiculous into the cart just to hear me object. "Absolutely not," I said when he reached for bright pink marshmallows. "They are festive. They are unnecessary. Life is better with unnecessary things." "Your bank account disagrees." Laughing, he returned the bag to the shelf. At the checkout, the cashier glanced at our groceries. "Are you 2 roommates?" she asked. Ethan raised one eyebrow, reminding me of yesterday's rule even though it had technically expired. "Something like that," I said before I could decide why I was playing along. She smiled. "Whoever planned dinner chose a good partner. You 2 look comfortable together." Comfortable. The word followed me out of the store. Being with Ethan had always been easy enough that I had stopped noticing the habits we had built. He carried the heavier bags without being asked. I remembered his favorite snacks. He walked on the outside of the sidewalk near traffic. I slowed down whenever he stopped to photograph something everyone else ignored. Those gestures had never seemed romantic. They were simply ours. Back at his apartment, music played from an old speaker while we cooked. Ethan attacked the vegetables with theatrical confidence, produced 3 wildly uneven pieces, and handed me the knife. "I am delegating," he said. "You are surrendering. A strong leader knows when to use available talent. You nearly turned dinner into abstract art. That still counts as art." We ate on his narrow balcony as the evening sky shifted from gold to deep blue. Traffic moved below us, and laughter drifted from neighboring apartments. For a while, neither of us spoke. The silence felt natural rather than empty. Ethan rested his elbows on the table and studied me with an expression I could not read. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "When was the last time you slowed down like this without checking the time?" I looked instinctively toward my phone and stopped myself. Between classes, freelance design work, internship applications, and graduation plans, every week had become another checklist. "I honestly do not remember." Ethan's smile held no teasing. "That is what I thought. Was this whole challenge an intervention? Maybe I missed my best friend." He said it lightly, but the words landed with unexpected weight. Then he looked toward the city, giving me room not to answer. Later, while we walked back to my apartment, our shoulders brushed for only a second. It had happened hundreds of times over the years, yet I noticed the exact place where his sleeve touched mine. Neither of us moved farther apart. When I reached home, I realized I had spent the entire day forgetting the bet. More unsettling, I had also forgotten to check my schedule. For the first time, Ethan's disruption had not felt like chaos. It had felt like relief. By Thursday morning, people around campus had stopped asking questions and started making assumptions. Someone waved from across the courtyard and shouted, "There they are!" Two students whispered when Ethan and I entered the library wearing different clothes but carrying the same coffee order. Ethan greeted everyone with his usual confidence while my face grew warmer each time. "This is your fault," I muttered as we climbed the library steps. "Probably," he admitted, "but you smiled yesterday. That was because you nearly destroyed a bell pepper." History does not need every detail. We worked at the same table for most of the afternoon. Ethan edited photographs while I finished a branding project. He slid a granola bar toward me before I noticed I was hungry. When I stretched my shoulders after sitting too long, he handed me the water bottle he had brought for me. Those gestures had existed for years, but now they stood out as if someone had adjusted the focus on one of his cameras. I wondered how many other things I had dismissed because they were familiar. When we left the library, the spring activities fair had filled the quad with music, food stands, strings of colored lights, and student clubs trying to recruit anyone who slowed down. A volunteer from the photography club spotted Ethan and waved us over. "Perfect timing," she said. "We need one more couple for a lifestyle project." I stepped back automatically. "We are not—" The words stopped, not because of the bet, but because Ethan did not tease me or silently demand that I continue. "We can leave," he said. "The rule from Sunday is over." His willingness to walk away changed the moment. I looked at the small set beneath the lights, then at him. "It is just a photograph." Surprise flashed across his face before he smiled. "Right, just a photograph." The volunteer gave us paper cups of lemonade and placed us side by side beneath the trees. "Do not pose," she instructed. "Talk to each other and forget the camera." Ethan leaned closer, leaving enough space for me to move if I wanted. He whispered, "For the record, your expression says you are being held hostage by citrus." I laughed before I could stop myself. The camera shutter clicked. "Now look at each other," the volunteer said. I expected awkwardness. Instead, I found Ethan watching me with the same open warmth he had carried through every year of our friendship. No punchline waited behind it, no performance. The shutter clicked again. When the volunteer showed us the preview, I barely recognized myself. I looked relaxed, happy. Ethan was not facing the camera at all. He was looking at me. "You two make this effortless," she said. "That is difficult to fake." Ethan became quiet, and I felt the truth of her words before I could reason them away. We left the fair with a digital copy of the photograph promised for later. That evening, we stopped at the ice cream shop where we had celebrated birthdays and exam results for years. The owner greeted us by name and prepared our usual cones without asking. Ethan handed me mine automatically. "Some traditions should never change," the owner said. As we wandered through familiar streets, Ethan finally glanced over. "Can I ask something honestly?" "Of course. Have these last few days really been terrible?" I prepared a sarcastic answer, but it would have been dishonest. I remembered the coffee, the grocery store, dinner on his balcony, and the photograph in which I looked happier than I had felt in months. "No," I admitted. "They have not been terrible." Ethan nodded, as if that small answer mattered more than he wanted me to know. When we separated outside my apartment, I watched him walk away longer than necessary. For the first time, I was not wondering what his next challenge would be. I was wondering why I had started looking forward to his messages before they arrived, and why the possibility of the week ending suddenly felt like a loss. Saturday arrived with clear skies and the kind of warm spring weather that pulled everyone outside. I'd almost convinced myself Ethan had run out of ideas when his message appeared after breakfast. Riverside Park at 11. Wear comfortable shoes. I found him beside the lake on a picnic blanket with sandwiches, a deck of cards, and 2 bottles of lemonade. Please tell me this is not another public embarrassment, I said. Not today. His innocent smile had become impossible to trust, but I sat down anyway. We spent the next hour playing cards, arguing about old movies, and feeding ducks from the edge of the path where signs allowed it. The afternoon felt like the weekends we had shared growing up, before internships and graduation turned our calendars into negotiations. I relaxed enough to forget the bet. That should have warned me. As families packed up and the walking trails grew quiet, Ethan checked his watch. I have today's challenge. Of course you do. He stood and led me toward a large oak tree overlooking the water. A breeze moved through the branches, scattering shifting patches of sunlight across the grass. Ethan folded his arms, but there was no teasing in his face. Rule number 5, he said softly. Give me a hug. I waited for the joke. That is it? That is it? You brought me across town for a hug? Yes. I laughed nervously. You are unbelievable. You can say no. His answer came immediately. I know we agreed to reasonable challenges, but this only works if you are comfortable. I studied him. The nervousness in his eyes was new, and suddenly the request did not feel ridiculous. I am comfortable. I stepped closer and gave him the quick, casual hug friends exchange before moving apart. Done! Ethan's smile was small. Not quite. What does that mean? 60 seconds. I stared at him. You actually planned a duration? I thought we could stand still for 1 full minute, but only if you still want to. I could have refused. Instead, I opened my arms again. Ethan returned the hug gently, not pulling me closer than I chose to stand. At first, I focused on the awkwardness. Then I heard leaves moving above us, children laughing near the playground, and ducks crossing the lake. Gradually, the tension left my shoulders. Ethan said nothing, neither did I. There was no audience, no matching clothing, and no stranger assuming what we were. There was only the familiar steadiness of someone who had been beside me for most of my life. Somewhere in the middle of that minute, my heartbeat slowed. I stopped counting. I noticed the warmth of his jacket, the even rhythm of his breathing, and how safe it felt not to rush toward the next obligation. When Ethan stepped back, he searched my expression with a hesitant smile. Well, I asked, did your challenge teach you anything? He glanced at the lake. More than I expected. That is suspiciously vague. Some results need time. We walked toward the parking lot, talking about graduation, weekend baseball, and restaurants we wanted to try. The conversation sounded ordinary, but something underneath it had changed. Once, our accidental shoulder brush had surprised me. Now I was aware of every inch of space between us. Ethan never crossed it without invitation, yet part of me kept noticing when he was close enough to do so. At my apartment that evening, I stood by the door and replayed the quiet minute beneath the oak tree. It had been the simplest challenge of the week, but it stayed with me longer than all the others combined. I was no longer asking whether Ethan was changing the rules of our friendship. I was beginning to wonder whether the bet had only exposed feelings I had been too busy or too afraid to name. The bet ended on Sunday night. Monday morning should have felt like freedom, but instead it felt empty. For the first time in a week, no message waited on my phone. There was no challenge, no mysterious meeting place, and no reason to rearrange my schedule around Ethan. I told myself life could return to normal. Normal, however, had become unusually quiet. I arrived 10 minutes early for class, took my usual seat, and checked the hallway twice. Halfway through the lecture, my phone lit up. My heart reacted before my brain did. It was only a campus email about graduation deadlines. After class, I automatically started toward the coffee shop where Ethan waited between photography sessions. I stopped halfway across the courtyard. He had not asked me to meet him. The bet was over. Even so, my feet had carried me there from habit, or hope. At noon, Caleb looked up from his laptop. You have checked your phone 6 times in 5 minutes. I am waiting for an email. From the university? I hesitated. Sure. He slowly closed his laptop. Or from Ethan? I looked away and rearranged my backpack. He has not texted today. Before last week, you complained whenever he interrupted your schedule. Now you look abandoned because he stopped. That is dramatic. Is it inaccurate? I had no answer. Later, I visited the student gallery to deliver a design proof for an exhibition. Ethan's photographs covered one wall. City streets, landscapes, smiling strangers, and quiet moments most people would miss. A frame near the center held me still. It showed 2 empty chairs facing a lake at sunset. Nothing about it should have felt personal, yet I could imagine Ethan in one chair and myself in the other. You came. I turned. Ethan stood behind me with another framed photograph under one arm. I was delivering something, I said too quickly. Of course. His smile carried no teasing. He nodded toward the wall. What do you think? I studied the photographs again. They feel different. Different how? Like you are not photographing places. You are photographing people feeling at home, even when the people are outside the frame. Ethan went quiet. After a moment, he smiled softly. That may be the nicest thing anyone has said about my work. We left the gallery together without mentioning the bet or the silence that had followed it. Conversation returned easily. We laughed about old teachers, argued over baseball standings, and debated where to celebrate graduation. Still, I noticed what neither of us said. We had spent a week pretending to be closer than friends, and now both of us were pretending nothing had changed. At sunset, Ethan turned toward the parking lot while I continued toward my apartment. We exchanged the same ordinary goodbye we had used hundreds of times. After a dozen steps, I looked back. Ethan had done the same. Across the quiet sidewalk, we caught each other watching. We laughed, waved awkwardly, and continued in opposite directions. The moment should have felt silly. Instead, it confirmed what I had resisted all day. Somewhere between one basketball bet and one quiet week, home had become less like a place and more like wherever Ethan happened to be. 2 days later, everything changed because of a conversation I was never supposed to hear. Ethan had left a camera battery in my backpack after the gallery, so I stopped by the photography studio to return it. The building was quiet, and voices carried from the editing room before I reached the door. One belonged to Ethan, the other belonged to his friend Mason. I raised my hand to knock just as Mason laughed. I still cannot believe you pulled off that entire week. Ethan gave a quiet chuckle. Barely. You planned the bet for weeks. You studied Ryan's predictions, chose a game he would never refuse, and built every challenge around spending time with him. My hand froze inches from the door. Ethan sighed. I did not rig the score, I guessed, and Ryan could veto anything. I only created a chance. A chance involving matching hoodies, grocery shopping, couple photographs, and a 60-second hug. When you list it like that, it sounds worse. It sounds like a date stretched across 7 days. Silence followed. Then Ethan spoke so quietly I almost missed it. I wanted 1 week when he would stop treating time with me like another appointment he might reschedule. Mason's voice softened. You could have asked him on an actual date. No! If he said no to dinner, I could survive it. If I told him how I felt and he walked out of my life, I could not. Every memory from the week rearranged itself inside me. The chosen places, the matching hoodies, the photograph, dinner, the hug beneath the oak tree. None of it had been random, but none of it had forced me either. Ethan had repeatedly given me a way out. I had repeatedly chosen to stay. That truth did not erase the deception. It made the deception harder to understand. How long are you going to hide this? Mason asked. Ethan's answer came after a long pause. As long as hiding it is the only way I get to keep my best friend. I stepped away before either of them saw me. The battery remained clenched in my hand as I walked across campus without knowing where I was going. By the time I reached the lakeside path, the sun was sinking behind the trees. I sat on our usual bench and asked myself whether I was angry because Ethan had designed the bet or because he had hidden the reason. If your best friend planned a week to get closer, would you feel betrayed or finally understand him? I could not answer that for myself yet, and every memory made the question more complicated. My phone vibrated. Are we still meeting for dinner tonight? A second message arrived. Everything okay? I stared at the screen, then locked it without replying. For the first time since childhood, I did not know how to speak to him. The next morning, I skipped our coffee stop. At lunch, I chose a different table. When I saw Ethan crossing the quad toward me, I pretended to answer a call and turned away. Each act of distance felt heavier than the one before it, but I needed time to separate my own feelings from the week he had arranged. By Friday, friends had started asking whether we had argued. Caleb watched me come home and said, "Avoiding him does not seem to be helping. It is giving me time. Time to decide whether you are mad at him or scared he was right about you." The question stayed with me after he left the room. Ethan had not manufactured the comfort I felt at dinner, the peace of that hug, or the emptiness after the messages stopped. He had created the circumstances, but my reactions belonged to me. That frightened me more than the plan itself. If every challenge had been an excuse to bring us closer, I could no longer pretend my feelings had appeared by accident, or that walking away would make them disappear. By Saturday afternoon, avoiding Ethan had become impossible. Every familiar place on campus carried some trace of him. The coffee shop where he ordered my drink before I arrived, the library table we claimed during finals, the lake path where we had spent years discussing everything except the one truth that mattered. Distance had not quieted my thoughts. It had only shown me how deeply he was woven into my life. My phone buzzed again. "If you are angry, I understand, but please let me explain. Riverside Park at 6 if you are willing." The final words mattered. If you are willing. At exactly 6, I found Ethan beneath the oak tree where he had asked for the 60-second hug. He looked as though he had barely slept. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by uncertainty I had never seen before. For several moments, neither of us spoke. "You heard me talking to Mason," he said at last. It was not a question. I nodded. He lowered his eyes. "I was hoping you would never learn that way." "Did you plan all of it? The game, the challenges, every place we went?" He met my eyes. "Yes. I chose the game and planned what I would ask if I won. I did not control the score, and I meant it every time I said you could refuse, but I should have told you why." He did not defend himself or hide behind a joke. "Why did you do it?" My voice sounded softer than I expected. Ethan drew a slow breath. "Because I was running out of excuses to spend time with you. Our schedules kept getting busier. Every conversation became shorter. We kept promising to hang out soon, and then another month disappeared. I missed you even when you were only a few buildings away." He looked toward the lake. "The bet was the only idea ridiculous enough to get one uninterrupted week." "You should have asked." "I know. You let me believe it was all a joke." "I know. And you did not get to choose what any of it meant to me." Ethan looked back immediately. "I would never choose that for you. Whatever you feel or do not feel is yours. I'm sorry I made you question whether you had a choice." The answer loosened some of the anger I had been carrying. It did not erase what he had done, but it showed me he understood the boundary. "Mason said you had feelings for me." Fear crossed Ethan's face. He could have denied it. Instead, he nodded. "Since we were 16. I stared at him. 16? Do you remember sophomore homecoming? The dance was too loud, so you spent the night helping me photograph the decorations. We got milkshakes afterward, and you listened to me talk about cameras for an hour even though you were exhausted. That was when I realized I had stopped looking forward to events. I was only looking forward to seeing you." Memories returned with new meaning. Ethan balancing on a ladder beneath gym lights, summer drives with the windows down, shared milkshakes after football games, and 1,000 ordinary afternoons I had never thought to name. "I kept expecting the feelings to disappear," he continued. "They did not. They grew up alongside our friendship." His voice remained steady, but his hands trembled slightly at his sides. "I never wanted to trick you into loving me. I wanted to remind you that being together could still matter before graduation pulled us in different directions. If nothing changed, I thought I would at least keep my best friend." His smile broke at the edges. Now I may have lost him anyway. "Ethan, you do not owe me an answer. You do not owe me forgiveness tonight. I only owed you the truth." He stepped back, giving me the space he should have trusted me with from the beginning. "I am sorry, Ryan. Truly." For the first time since overhearing him, I saw more than the plan. I saw someone who had carried love and fear in equal measure for 6 years, then made one foolish choice because he believed honesty might cost him everything. The silence between us was hurting both of us, but what happened next had to be my choice. Ethan looked ready to leave. Before he could turn away, I called his name. He stopped but did not step closer. I crossed the grass until only a few feet separated us. "Do you know what made me angriest?" I asked. He shook his head. "Not the matching hoodies, not the grocery store, not even the fact that you studied how I predict basketball scores." A faint, embarrassed smile touched his face. "It was realizing you spent 6 years believing you had to hide something this important from me, and then tried to protect our friendship by controlling the circumstances instead of trusting me with the truth." Ethan absorbed the words without interrupting. "You are right," he said. "I should have trusted you. Yes, you should have." I looked toward the lake where the last sunlight moved across the water. The week replayed in my mind. Coffee and matching hoodies, pasta on his balcony, the photograph beneath the lights, and one quiet minute under this tree. Every challenge I had considered embarrassing had asked me to slow down and notice the person who had been beside me almost my entire life. Ethan had planned the invitations, but he had not planned my laughter, my anticipation, or the way normal life felt empty when the week ended. "You said you fell for me when you were 16, I said. "I think I was slower." Hope appeared in his expression, but he did not assume. "What does that mean?" "It means I spent the week wondering why everything felt different. I thought your challenges were changing our friendship. They were not. They were showing me something that had already been there." "Ryan, every morning after the bet ended, I checked my phone for you. I looked for you between classes. When I avoided you, campus felt like a collection of places we were supposed to share." I smiled despite myself. That should have been an obvious clue. Ethan laughed softly, almost disbelievingly. "So you are not walking away?" "No. But if we do this, we do it honestly." "Agreed. No hidden plans. No using bets to say what you are afraid to say. And if either of us is uncomfortable, we talk about it." "Absolutely." His answer came without hesitation. "Then I have a challenge for you." The familiar warmth returned to his eyes. "I am listening." "Ask me on a real date. No tricks." Ethan took one careful breath. "Ryan, will you have dinner with me Friday night, not as part of a bet and not because you owe me anything?" I let him wait for exactly 1 second. "Yes." Relief transformed his face so completely that we both laughed. I stepped closer and opened my arms. Ethan waited until I nodded before returning the hug. This time there was no timer, no audience, and no promise to fulfill. I held him because I wanted to. Beneath the same oak tree where the truth had first become impossible to ignore, my best friend and I chose something new without giving up everything that had brought us there. Weeks later, people asked when our story began. Some guessed the basketball game. Others chose the matching hoodies or the photograph at the fair. The truth reached much farther back. It began when two 8-year-old boys argued over a borrowed baseball glove and accidentally found the person who would always feel like home. The bet did not create our love. It only forced us to stop rushing past what our hearts had quietly known, and honesty finally gave us the courage to choose it. If this story moved you, like and share it with someone who believes friendship can become love.